Okay, so not only are we going to communicate with our students, but we expect, just like in the classroom, that our students are able to communicate with each other and collaborate, because we know as teachers that some of our strongest learning comes when they collaborate and communicate with each other. One way to do this is through discussion threads. Students can respond to each other on a discussion thread. You will want to set expectations as to what you expect in the way of a response. Do they need to respond one time, two times to two different people? What's a time frame? Do they need to respond within 24 hours? Do they need to write a post before they can respond? So you're going to need to think through how you want to utilize the discussions. Now, in Classroom, Google Classroom, if you're using that, you can do it in your classwork stream here. You can go to Create. Besides assignments, there's Question. Okay, and so you can add the information here. You can decide if there's points for it, if there's not, etc., etc. That's one way to do a question. And that's probably the easiest way to do the question itself. You can also do announcements and have them do your question in the announcement and have them respond. Personally, I think Google Classroom is great, but it gets really bogged down. It gets kind of cluttered kind of quickly. If you're using Canvas, if you're an actual distance educator, talk to your Canvas person and they can show you how to utilize the LMS discussion stream in Canvas. I prefer myself, when I'm doing discussions, other formats outside of Google Classroom. And still other tools might be used. One of the things that I use a lot is Padlet, and that's because I've been using Padlet, and I'm one of those people that I don't want to lose my Padlet, so I spend the $12 a month. Jamboard's out now, which is pretty much like it, but Padlet still has some kind of benefits over Jamboard, in the sense that you have more options for different types of media, and the length of your post can be a little bit longer, or quite a bit longer, than you can in Jamboard. So Padlet's where we have a lot of our interactive boards. And the thing with Padlet, though, is if you're going to have students posting in part of a discussion or sharing any kind of information, you need to make sure that you share the expectations about they need to communicate with others that have posted as well. They need to go back and forth. It's not just post once and you're done. Okay, you actually need to communicate with other students. Maybe it's in a peer review. It's kind of up to your subject how you want to do it. There's another thing called dot storming. Dot storming's like Padlet, but it kind of lets you do a survey as well. You can vote for like what your favorites are. So in dot storming, there is a link here. I would suggest looking at it. This is one of the tools I will spend some time at. You can go ahead and sign up and log in, but basically you can work in small groups. You can work as a class, and you can share your ideas down just like in Padlet and Jamboard, like on little stickies, but then you have the option for voting up to 3 of them. So you can upvote things and say, okay, these are the most important things that we look at. So here's an example, and this is what I'm going to have you guys fill out today here. I'm going to also have it at the end of the slideshow as well. But here's a dot storm on distance learning ideas. You're going to brainstorm the easiest way to implement distance learning with our students. It could be something that you've learned today. It could be something that you've been doing or something that you've heard elsewhere. But in either case, you want to come up with what's the easiest way to do it. Well, maybe it's to focus on let's do organizing Google Classroom. Okay, maybe that's so it's the same across classrooms, maybe. So students or teachers are all using it. I don't know. I'm a big proponent on everybody in a school, at least a school building, that have the same students using the same platform, just to make it easy for students to know where to go and learn how to navigate a little bit easier. But that's me. And so you just add a card and you can add them. Once you're done adding, you can add as many cards as you want. Then you start voting for them. Okay, you have 3 votes available and 3 votes max. You can also chat with each other right over on the side. You do have to create an account beforehand. So today's challenge, and I'll have the link at the end as well, is to try adding cards and voting in the dot storming application. Okay, and see if that's something that you might find useful in your own classroom. Jamboard is like the new Padlet, but it's like Padlet with all these other whiteboard options. It can do a lot more than Padlet, but there are some drawbacks, like you can't write as much on the sticky notes. So if you actually want students to write and not just brainstorm, Padlet might be the way to go. But if you want them to just get ideas out and jot things down, then Jamboard is going to be the way to go. So I have a sample Jamboard. If you haven't used it before, I will show you where to go for that. But here's a sample Jamboard that I did this year, and I believe we did this one, remotely. So what the students had to do is just kind of watch a video, and they had to come up with all kinds of questions. We were creating, I don't know if you're familiar with a driving question board, but we were creating one. And so then the students had to go in and they had to sort them. So what I did is I had students do it all on one. Let me see if I have it here. Sorry, the students had to do them all on like their own, and then they started combining with each other to form like a master one. And then they started rearranging them and grouping them together. So that way they could keep like questions together. And it kind of drove what questions we needed to answer in our unit. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of like 6 different topics, 6 different questions that we decided needed to be answered in order to explain the video that we watched. So to do a Jamboard, there's a couple different ways that you can reach it. Okay, it is available in Google Drive. You can do New, go to More, and you'll see Google Jamboard. You can also click on the waffle. The waffle, again, is the 9 little circle square here. That's often called the waffle, where our Google apps are. And you can scroll down till you see Jamboard. 2 different ways to access it. It is a Google application, so you're going to need to make sure that your share settings are on, just like you would do slides or docs. You can use a pointer or a select tool to select something and move it around. This is our sticky note tool. You can change the color. You can add images. And then you can also use a laser pointer. I found that this is also really useful. Students will explain things. They'll draw pictures on here, because you can also draw pictures, and then they'll explain what they're drawing and how something happens, like an equation, for instance, or like photosynthesis equations. They were able to show and explain their understanding of photosynthesis using like Post-it notes and images and lines and screencasts to record their thoughts. Now, Ditch That Textbook, I'll be bringing that up later. It's one of my favorite resources with Matt Miller. He has a lot of different templates with ways that you can use Jamboard. I would suggest looking at them. You just have to copy them, open them, and copy them. And, you know, some of them, it's focusing on communicating with like teachers. We'll talk in the next one about social emotional learning. But sometimes it's just fun to interact with students upon students, like the Guess Who here. They can share more about themselves, and then we can play a game with it. And so there's all these different templates, too, that you can use for Jamboard. And it allows students to communicate with each other and respond to each other in a low-stakes format. Flipgrid, of course, we've probably used it. I'm guessing a lot of us have used it. It is an awesome video tool that you can do a video reflection respond to. There's a new one out called VoiceThread. I haven't explored it too much, except that you can apparently use more multimedia with it. So if that's something that you want to check out. Again, Google Chat, the students have this enabled. They cannot do the Hangouts. They cannot start a Hangout, but Google Chats, from my understanding, is enabled. Now, if I'm wrong on that, please correct me and let me know. Of course, collaborative documents and slides. Now, the thing with that, though, is that you don't want them to collaborate by doing separate slides and not communicating with each other. I was watching this Edu Protocols Ed in the Bend, Ed Tech in the Bend series today, and they were doing different ways that you could use slides to really communicate and collaborate. One of them was called, I think, a thin sandwich, and basically students had a word and they had to find a picture, and then they had to like vote on, and then they had to make a claim, evidence, and reasoning. For what they were observing, and then they had to like vote on them. And then there was another one that they had to, like, the first two, you had two people and 5 slides, and the first slide person 1 did, and the second slide person 2 did, and then they did a Venn diagram. So there's different cool ways that you can use slides and docs to collaborate, but just make sure that they are going back and forth with it. I'm going to actually type in Edu protocols because that's a reminder for myself too that I would like to spend some more time looking into it. And if you have time and want to spend time looking into it, I highly suggest it. And the last thing I put down is just fun. It's a great, authentic, real, kind of more authentic approach to communication. If you think about it, you've probably all been on a blog where, you know, it might have been a sport blog, or it might have been a tech blog, or an education blog, or, you know, you might have been reading about how someone came up with this awesome recipe for their kids. That's all Pinteresty, and you wanted to find out more about it because you have the time to do all that stuff. But you've probably been on a blog at some point. This is a safe way that students can participate in blogging. It's EduBlog. It is, I say safe in the sense that, you know, parents, it's not public. It is unlisted. We can have people respond to each other, but it's very limited. And it's just, there's a little bit more oversight. But students can create their own blog, and then they can post on each other's, they can leave comments, etc. I know different LMS systems like Canvas and PowerSchool Unified Classroom, they have like wiki pages that are similar, but the format of EduBlog, I think, just makes it feel more real for students, and they become more invested and more involved in it. So if you could utilize a blog in your classroom, please check out EduBlogs, and that will definitely enhance communication between students, collaboration, communication with students, and the real world, you know, so give that a shot if you can. So definitely focus on communication, collaboration between students, allow it as much as possible in a safe and protected environment.